Have you ever worked your whole life for a moment that mattered, only to have the people closest to you laugh before it even began? And what do you do when the family that should know your worth is the first to reduce it to a joke? The night my life finally changed did not begin with a grand speech or a dramatic entrance. It began with a text message. I sent the invitation the way I send most things to my family now, careful, neutral, stripped of hope before hope could embarrass me. My name is Brielle Carter. I live alone in a glass high-rise overlooking Boston Harbor, and in the world beyond my family, I manage high-level financial strategy worth more money than my father has ever truly understood. But inside the Carter family group chat, I have always been the same thing. The quiet office girl, the useful one, the one they never had to take seriously. I typed the date, the location, the reason, an industry award ceremony, then added one final line, saying it would mean something to me, if they came. My father, Victor Carter, replied first almost instantly. An award for what, Brielle? Executive scheduling. Then came the laughing emoji. I stared at the screen just long enough to feel the old familiar sting before my sister Maddie jumped in. We already have dinner plans that night, she wrote. Hard to reschedule for a work banquet. My mother, Elaine, said nothing at all. She just tapped a heart under my father's message, and somehow that silent approval landed harder than either of their words. Then Maddie sent a voice note. I almost did not play it, but I did. Her soft laugh came through first. If it is one of those Employee of the Month things, at least take a picture for us. I want to see the big moment. I set my phone down and walked out onto the balcony. The harbor wind hit my face like cold truth, sharp and clean, while the city lights shimmered across the black water below. Behind me, my apartment was warm. In front of me, Boston looked like power made visible. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered into the dark. Tonight, I either swallow this the way I always have, or I finally let the ledger balance itself. And standing there with the wind cutting through my sweater, I began to remember the first time my family taught me how small they needed me to be. Standing there with the wind cutting through my sweater, I began to remember the first time my family taught me how small they needed me to be. The cold coming off Boston Harbor did not make me feel hurt anymore. It made me feel clear. My father's message still glowed in my mind. An award for what? Executive scheduling. The words should have stung, but out there beneath the black sky and the distant hum of traffic, they landed differently. For the first time, I saw them for what they were. My family was not blind to me. They had never been blind. They saw exactly enough to know I could become something larger than the story they had assigned me, and that was why they kept forcing me back into it. In our house, I was never allowed to be the mind in the room. I was the helper, the organizer, the one who made things easier for other people. That role kept everyone comfortable, especially Victor, because if I stopped being small, then he would have to face how much of his so-called empire was really just posture and polished memory. A picture rose in my mind so sharply I could almost smell it. I was 12 years old, standing in our old kitchen with a regional math trophy pressed against my chest. The overhead light cast that weak yellow glow across the counters, and my hands were trembling with excitement. My father was leaning back in his chair with a glass of bourbon, the scent of smoke and oak drifting from his jacket. I waited for him to look at me, really look at me. Instead, he gave the trophy a passing glance and said, "You're good at helping, Brielle. Just don't confuse that with being born to lead." My mother, Elaine, did not even pause. She kept drying a wine glass as if he had commented on the weather. That was the moment I learned praise in our house was always conditional, always out of reach. So, I adapted. In the professional world, I became Brielle Hayes, using my mother's maiden name like a firewall between my real life and the version of me my family preferred. Under that name, I built strategies, moved markets, and managed an international portfolio worth over $120 million. But if Victor ever admitted that out loud, he would also have to admit his own power had become decorative. I stepped back inside and looked at the invitation resting on the table beside the earrings I had not put on yet. My name was printed beautifully. 3 seats were still empty, but this time, I did not feel rejected. I felt finished. I realized I was not breaking. I was simply done funding the emotions of people who had lived too long on the discount of my silence. And right then, far below my window, the car waiting to take me to the gala, pulled up to the curb like the night itself, was ready to open the final report of my life. And right then, far below my window, the car waiting to take me to the gala, pulled up to the curb like the night itself, was ready to open the final report of my life. By the time I stepped into the Halcyon Ballroom in Back Bay, I had already made peace with one truth. I was arriving alone, but I was not arriving unseen. The place glowed with polished marble, high ceilings, and crystal chandeliers that scattered light like shattered glass across the room. Soft music moved beneath the murmur of powerful conversations, and every few seconds I heard the clean, delicate clink of crystal against crystal. Expensive perfume hung in the air, layered over old wood, champagne, and money. My heels struck the stone floor in a steady rhythm as I crossed the entrance, and for the first time that night, I did not feel like someone's overlooked daughter. I felt like the woman I had built in silence. At the head table, I saw them immediately. 3 empty chairs, reserved under my guest list. My chest tightened for half a breath, then loosened just as quickly when I looked down at the embossed program in my hand. My name was there in gold, not reduced, not softened, not explained away. When the chief executive officer took the stage and called my name for the Global Strategic Finance Laureate Award, the room answered with applause that rolled toward me like a wave. He spoke about the recovery model I had built during the downturn, the one that kept the firm steady when other portfolios were collapsing. He spoke about the international assets under my oversight, more than $120 million, and about the kind of precision that does not shout but changes outcomes. He called my judgment rare. He called my leadership decisive. And as I walked to the podium and accepted the weight of that award into my hands, I realized something that almost took my breath away. For the first time in my life, I was seeing myself without my family standing between me and the truth. After the ceremony, while people gathered around with glasses raised and polished congratulations, a senior partner leaned in beside me and asked quietly, "Your family couldn't make it?" I held her gaze, smiled once, and said, "They always arrive late when the truth starts showing itself." She gave me a look that told me she understood more than she asked. I did not stay for the full celebration. I left while the applause still seemed to linger in the walls, and slipped into the back seat of my car. The city lights moved across the tinted window in long ribbons of white and gold as I opened my laptop. I did not check photos. I did not look at social media. I logged into a private investment portal that carried a history no one in my family had ever earned the right to know. 2 years earlier, when Victor's company was close to going under, I had stepped in through a Delaware-registered entity, managed by my family office, and issued a $6 million bridge loan. I had not done it as his daughter. I had done it as a disciplined investor, protecting an asset with terms, conditions, and consequences. A few weeks earlier, a report had crossed my desk, showing that part of the latest disbursement had been diverted into a penthouse lease for Maddie and into propping up her failing fashion label. It was a clear covenant breach, no ambiguity, no excuse. I stared at the words now glowing in the dark on my screen. Notice of default authorized. I did not feel rage. I did not feel triumph. I felt the cold stillness of an account coming due. I clicked to confirm, and somewhere else in the city, My family was lifting their glasses over money they had never once imagined was mine. I clicked to confirm, and somewhere else in the city, my family was lifting their glasses over money they had never once imagined was mine. At the Black Briar, the room glowed with amber light and old money ambition. Dark wood paneling, low jazz humming through the air, red wine catching the light like polished garnet. It was exactly the kind of place Victor loved, because it made decline look dignified. Maddie had her phone propped against a water glass, camera angled just right for her live stream, her smile bright and practiced, as she leaned toward the screen. "Tonight we're celebrating real success," she said with a laugh that sounded sweet until you listened closely. "Not office participation trophies." Victor chuckled into his glass. Elaine sat beside him in a silk blouse, saying nothing, but the approval in her face was as clear as if she had joined in herself. The comments rolled fast across Maddie's screen, and she read them out loud like she was hosting a show. One of them asked, "So your sister's still basically a secretary?" Maddie tilted her head and smiled. "Something like that, but she's very committed to the brand." Victor waved over the waiter and ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, then leaned back and said, "You should celebrate while you still know what real power looks like." It was the kind of line that had always landed well in rooms where no one checked the numbers too closely. Then, his phone lit up. At first he barely glanced at it, but something on the screen made his hand stop midway to his drink. It was a local business feature, clean and polished, with a headline that read like a verdict. "The woman behind the recovery strategy reshaping the market." Under it was my photo at the podium, the award in my hand, my shoulders straight, my expression calm. Victor read it once, then again, slower. The color began to drain from his face. Maddie leaned over, expecting something small, maybe even funny, but her smile tightened the moment she saw my name and what came after it. Elaine took the phone from him without asking. Her mouth pressed into a thin line as her eyes moved down the screen. The sound at their table changed all at once. The laughter was gone. The room was still full, silverware still touched china, glasses still clinked in the distance, but at that table, the air had turned heavy. The article called me a strategist. It named the scale of the international portfolio under my oversight. It quoted leaders Victor had spent years trying to impress. There was no trace of the harmless little office girl they had been mocking all evening. And before any of them could fully process that first blow, the second one arrived. Another notification hit Victor's phone, then another. His business credit line had been frozen. Investor support had been withdrawn. Several company accounts were placed under immediate review. He opened the messages with shaking fingers, digging through the legal disclosures, following the ownership trail deeper and deeper until the structure came into focus. A Delaware entity, a private family office, a chain of decisions that ended in one name he could no longer avoid: mine. In that instant, Victor understood that the company he thought he was still commanding had been standing on my money for 2 years. I had been the floor beneath his shoes, while he spent years telling people I was barely worth mentioning. Then his phone rang again. This time, it was the company's finance director. Victor answered, but he did not speak for a moment. From across the table, Maddie could hear enough to know it was bad. Senior staff had heard about the freeze. They were asking whether payroll would clear on Monday. Victor opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked old then, not powerful, not commanding, just stunned. Maddie reached for her phone and ended the live stream in a rush, but it was already too late. Thousands of people had watched the exact moment confidence left the table. In that moment they no longer saw a minor employee they could laugh off. They saw the person who had been holding up the roof over their heads while they were busy making a joke out of her name. And then, across town, my phone vibrated in the after party, and my father's name lit up on the screen, like the final invoice had finally reached the person who owed it. And then, across town, my phone vibrated in the after-party, and my father's name lit up on the screen, like the final invoice had finally reached the person who owed it. I was standing near a wall of glass overlooking the Boston skyline, one hand around a crystal tumbler, the other holding the phone as it buzzed again. Around me, the room carried the quiet confidence of real influence: old oak, aged whiskey, low conversation, the kind of place where power did not need to announce itself, because everyone in it already knew where it sat. I let the phone ring a few extra seconds, not to be cruel, just to let the silence settle into its proper shape. When I answered, Victor's voice was barely recognizable. Gone was the polished arrogance, the casual superiority, the easy contempt. What came through instead was breathless and rough. "Brielle, the accounts are frozen," he said. "The credit line is gone. We can't make payroll. If this isn't reversed, the company is finished in 48 hours. In the background, I heard movement, a chair scraping, someone trying not to panic. Then Maddie's voice cut in, thin and shaking. "Brielle, please. Dad's having chest pain. You have to fix this." Behind her, I could hear Elaine crying softly, no elegance left in the sound, no polished restraint, just fear. I turned slightly and caught my own reflection in the dark glass, calm, composed, finally unfamiliar to the version of me they had always tried to keep. "If he is having a real medical emergency," I said evenly, "call 911. Money cannot repair a heart damaged by greed." Victor inhaled sharply. Then he reached for the oldest weapon he had. "I'm your father." The words hung there, expecting obedience out of history alone. I looked at my reflection and answered in the same steady tone. "I thought I was just your low-level office girl, a shadow in a corner, someone who should feel grateful for a participation certificate and keep her head down." He started to say my name again, but I did not let him reclaim the conversation. "And one more thing," I said. "My team completed a forensic review this morning. We found evidence of tax fraud and concealed insolvency in your holdings. If you try to come after me, those records will bury you faster than this liquidity crisis ever could." I ended the call before he could beg, argue, or rearrange the truth. The company did not survive the next 48 hours. Assets were liquidated. Emergency filings followed. I watched the legal process from a distance, with the same calm I used to reserve for market reports. I allowed them to keep the family home, not out of mercy, but because I refused to spend one more ounce of energy chasing something that had long ago lost all emotional value. My only condition was permanent no contact. Months later, I moved into my new office on the top floor of a tower in Boston's financial district. One evening, I opened the old family group chat and stared at the mocking emojis, the dismissive replies, the tiny digital record of everything I had once mistaken for authority. Then, I deleted it. And in that quiet moment, I understood something I wish I had learned years earlier. Your worth is not a debate. It is not a family vote. Sometimes the black sheep is simply the only one strong enough to outgrow the limits of the flock. The most expensive kind of revenge is not watching them fall. It is building a life so high that the voices that once tried to diminish you can no longer reach your name.